On a crowded flight, a millionaire's crying baby, silenced only by a poor boy's lullaby, but that act of kindness unleashed a storm of racism, betrayal, and poetic justice that the world would never forget. The boarding gate buzzed with impatience. Families juggled strollers, business travelers checked their watches, and voices tangled in a low hum of departure. At the center of the priority line stood Charles Whitmore, his polished shoes tapping against the floor, his suit gleaming under the airport lights. He cradled his infant daughter as though the world itself owed him silence for the effort. "Make sure our luggage gets priority handling," Charles demanded of the airline staff, flashing a platinum card like it was a badge of superiority. His wife, Tiffany, scrolled idly on her phone, barely acknowledging the tired mother behind them, who struggled to calm two toddlers. From a distance, Malik watched, barely 13, dressed in faded jeans and a too-big hoodie. He clutched his small boarding pass as though it might vanish. He stood in the economy line, pushed around by taller travelers who noticed him only as an obstacle. His eyes flickered. To the Whitmores he'd seen men like Charles before, men who measured worth by dollar signs and skin color. The gate agent called first class. Charles strode forward, chin high, as if ascending a throne. Malik waited as his line crawled forward, every shuffle echoing the imbalance of privilege. On the jet bridge, Charles muttered, "They'd better have my champagne ready. First class isn't what it used to be." Inside the plane, a flight attendant smiled politely. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Whitmore. You know who I am." Charles smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. "Yes, sir," she replied carefully, her voice trained to mask resentment. Malik boarded much later, sliding quietly into his cramped middle seat near the back. He tucked his backpack under the seat and drew his hoodie tighter, hoping to remain invisible. But he noticed everything: the laughter up front, the struggle in coach, the subtle division carved into the airplane itself. The baby began fussing before takeoff, her soft cries carrying through the cabin. Tiffany sighed. "Honestly, Charles, can't the nanny handle this better at home? We should have left her." Charles grumbled, rocking the baby awkwardly. "She quiet down. She always does." Malik tilted his head, listening. The baby's cry reminded him of nights with his mother, before cancer stole her from him. He remembered the lullabies she sang, low, steady, filled with warmth. The captain's voice announced departure. Passengers fastened belts, phones switched off. The baby's cry grew louder, cutting through the quiet. Charles muttered curses under his breath. Malik closed his eyes, humming silently to himself, the echo of his mother's song soft against the storm of privilege unraveling in front of him. This was only the beginning. The engines roared, pressing passengers back into their seats. The airplane lifted, steadying above the clouds. The cries of Charles Whitmore's baby did not fade. They sharpened, piercing through the hum of the cabin. "Make it stop," Charles growled, bouncing the infant clumsily against his shoulder. "She's been crying since boarding. What am I paying for if this airline can't even give us peace?" A flight attendant leaned over with a practiced smile. "Sir, infants often cry during takeoff because of the air pressure. It should ease soon. May I bring warm milk or a pacifier?" "Bring me silence," Charles snapped. "That's what you can bring." Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A man in the next seat tightened his headphones. A woman 2 rows ahead pressed her fingers against her temples. The crying carried, relentless, filling every space with tension. Malik sat quietly, wedged between 2 strangers. He tried not to draw attention, but his gaze kept drifting toward the commotion in first class. He recognized frustration, not at the baby, but at the sharp cruelty in Charles' tone. The boy had seen that look before, impatience steeped in entitlement. Another attendant, a young black woman with kind eyes, knelt beside Tiffany. "Ma'am, may I help soothe her?" Tiffany waved her off. "She doesn't like strangers. Besides, Charles can handle it." "Can't you, dear?" Charles sneered. "Don't tell me how to raise my child." His eyes flicked to the attendant. "Why don't you focus on doing your actual job instead of pretending to be a nanny?" The words landed heavy. Passengers heard them, exchanged glances, and yet no one spoke. The attendant's smile faltered, but she nodded softly and backed away. Malik's fists clenched in his lap. He had felt the sting of that tone countless times, the dismissal, the subtle venom reserved for people who looked like him. Minutes passed. The crying grew louder, shrill and desperate. Charles cursed under his breath, tugging at the baby's blanket. Worthless airline. Worthless service. Can't even control a child on my own plane. It's not your plane, sir. A passenger muttered from behind. Charles turned, his glare sharp. Excuse me. The man raised his hands. Just saying. It happens. Babies cry. Charles' lips curled. Easy for you to say when you're not the one paying more than your mortgage for this flight. Silence followed. The engines hummed. The baby wailed. Malik lowered his head, humming softly under his breath. The lullaby again, though no one could hear it yet. His chest ached with memories, but also with a strange pull. Something in him knew the storm wasn't just in the skies outside. It was swelling inside the cabin, fueled by pride, power, and prejudice. The attendants exchanged uneasy looks. They wanted to intervene but knew who Charles was, a man with money, influence, and a temper. As the seatbelt sign blinked off, the baby's cries only grew. The turbulence within had only begun. The cabin air grew heavier with each passing minute. The baby's cries had turned into long, ragged wails, echoing through the pressurized space like an alarm no one could shut off. Passengers fidgeted, exchanging exasperated glances. Can't you control your child? A man muttered from economy, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. Charles whipped his head around. Excuse me, are you questioning me? The man shrugged. We're all suffering here. Maybe let the flight attendants stay out of my business. Charles cut him off. You think you could do better? I doubt it. His voice carried, sharp, daring anyone to respond. The flight attendant who had earlier tried to help approached, again, cautious. Sir, if I may, we could. Charles raised a hand to silence her. No, you've already proven useless. You people don't know the first thing about service. Just stand there and collect your paycheck. The emphasis on you people wasn't lost on anyone. A murmur rippled through the rows. The attendant stiffened, nodded with forced composure, and stepped back. Tiffany leaned closer, whispering sharply, Charles, lower your voice. Why should I? He snapped. I'm the victim here. My baby is crying, the staff is incompetent, and now the passengers are glaring at me like I'm the problem. At that, Malik's eyes flicked up from his lap. The boy had been silent, humming softly to himself to stay calm, but his gaze met the baby's red-faced, trembling, gasping between sobs. Malik smiled gently, the way his mother once did for him when the world seemed too loud. It lasted only a moment, but Charles caught it. His eyes narrowed. What are you looking at, boy? The words sliced through the hum of the cabin. Heads turned. Malik froze, shrinking under the weight of so many eyes. I wasn't. Charles sneered. Don't play innocent. Sitting back there, staring at my family like some stray dog. You think it's funny? Think you're better than me? No, sir, Malik said quietly. His voice was steady but small. Trash, Charles muttered, shaking his head. Can't even afford a proper seat, and yet here you are, gawking like you matter. A few passengers gasped. Others looked away, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire. The baby's cries only intensified, as if reflecting the ugliness spilling into the air. Malik lowered his gaze, cheeks burning, but inside something stirred. Not anger, not yet, but the sting of recognition. He had been here before, blamed for existing, punished for being seen. The blame was never really about the baby. It was about control, about who had the power to humiliate and who was expected to endure. And Malik, quiet and cornered, understood that truth with painful clarity. The baby's cries had reached a fever pitch, a shrill rhythm that rattled nerves and frayed tempers. Even the flight attendants, trained to mask discomfort, stole weary glances at one another. Charles, red-faced and sweating, shifted his daughter from one arm to the other. Enough already, he barked, as though scolding the infant would force her to obey. Tiffany fussed with the blanket but offered little else. A passenger in row 8 sighed audibly. This is unbearable. Complain to the airline, Charles snapped, not to me. You think I enjoy this? She's my baby. The black attendant, the one Charles had humiliated earlier, lingered nearby, wringing her hands. She exchanged whispers with a colleague. We should intervene, she murmured, and risk our jobs. The other whispered back. You know who he is. Malik heard them, every word. He shifted in his seat, heart pounding. His instincts screamed to stay silent, to remain invisible as always. But the sound of the baby, raw, helpless, pulled at him. He remembered his mother's lullabies, how her voice melted storms into silence, and he remembered the look on Charles' face earlier, the the sneer that marked him as less than human. Something inside him refused to bend this time. Slowly, Malik unbuckled his seatbelt. The man beside him frowned. Kid, sit down. You'll get yourself in trouble. Malik shook his head. I can help. His voice was soft but steady. He stepped into the aisle, walking toward first class. Dozens of eyes followed. The attendants stiffened, alarm flickering across their faces. Charles noticed immediately. His glare was sharp enough to cut steel. What do you think you're doing? Malik stopped just short of his seat. He kept his voice calm, respectful. Sir, I think I can help your baby. Laughter erupted from a few passengers. Tiffany blinked in disbelief. You, just a kid. Charles sneered. Oh, this is rich. Some poor stowaway thinks he's going to do what I can't. Sit down before I have you thrown off this plane. Malik swallowed hard. His legs trembled, but his eyes held steady. Please, just let me try. The cabin had gone silent except for the wailing child. Passengers leaned forward, caught between disbelief and curiosity. Charles scoffed loudly. You're out of your mind. This isn't your place. You think you can just walk up to me, to my family, and play hero. You're nothing, nothing. The words echoed, biting deeper than any insult should. Yet Malik didn't flinch. I'm not trying to be a hero, he said quietly. I just don't like to see a baby suffer. A murmur rippled through the cabin, a shift, subtle but real. Someone whispered, let him try. Another voice followed, what's the harm? The attendants looked at one another. They couldn't overrule Charles, but their silence spoke volumes. Charles' lips curled. He wanted to say no, to crush the boy where he stood. But the pressure of the cabin, the eyes on him, pinned him down. Finally, with a mocking laugh, he gestured toward the child. Fine, amuse us. Show everyone how a nobody thinks he can outshine me. Tiffany rolled her eyes but didn't protest. Malik took a slow breath. His hands shook, but his spirit steadied. He leaned gently toward the infant, his voice barely above. A whisper. The moment had come. The first crack in the wall of power that Charles had built around himself, and Malik, trembling but unbroken, was ready to step through it. The cabin was silent, save for the sharp, ragged cries of the millionaire's baby. Every pair of eyes fixed on Malik, the boy who had dared to step into first class. He stood still for a moment, gathering courage. His throat was dry, but somewhere deep inside, he heard his mother's voice, soft, steady, the sound that once carried him through sleepless nights. Malik leaned slightly closer, careful not to touch, and began to hum. At first it was faint, barely audible, over the infant's screams, a lullaby, slow, rhythmic, the kind meant to quiet storms and soften shadows. His voice trembled in the beginning, but then it steadied, rich with memory. The baby's cries wavered, a ripple spread through the passengers, heads tilted, breath held. Charles scoffed. This is ridiculous, but his voice was less certain. Thinner, Malik continued. The melody grew stronger, wrapping itself around the cabin like a gentle blanket. Each note carried weight, grief for the mother he had lost, love for the comfort she had given, and defiance against the man who had called him nothing. The baby hiccuped between sobs. Then, slowly, her cries softened. Tiffany's eyes widened. Charles, she's calming down. The hush in the cabin deepened. People leaned forward, mouths parted in disbelief. Malik sang the words softly now, his voice barely above a whisper. Hush now, little one. The night will guard you. Hush now, little one. The world can't harm you. The baby's eyelids fluttered. Her tiny fists unclenched. She released a long, shaky sigh and nestled against Charles' chest, silent. The cabin erupted in gasps. A woman covered her mouth with her hand. A man muttered, unbelievable. Another whispered, he did it. For the first time since boarding, peace blanketed the plane. Charles looked down at his daughter, stunned, as though he couldn't comprehend the miracle. Then his gaze snapped back to Malik. His jaw tightened, pride warring with humiliation. You think this proves something? Charles spat, though his voice lacked its earlier thunder. Malik stepped back, lowering his eyes respectfully. No, sir. I just wanted her to rest. Passengers broke into quiet applause, hesitant at first, then swelling into something undeniable. A woman in coach called out, "Bravo, young man." Another passenger added, "He's got more grace than the rest of us combined." The flight attendant who Charles had insulted earlier smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. Charles' face turned crimson. Applause for the boy. Admiration for him, not the millionaire. He adjusted his tie, his voice sharp and defensive. Enough of this circus. She just got tired, that's all. Don't act like this boy had anything to do with it. But the cabin had seen. They had heard. They knew. Malik returned quietly to his seat, ignoring the curious stares, his heart still pounding. He pulled his hoodie tight, but inside, warmth bloomed. For once, he hadn't remained invisible. For once, his voice had mattered. The plane hummed steadily through the night sky, carrying with it the fragile silence of a baby and the quiet strength of a boy who had done the unthinkable. The baby slept soundly in Charles' arms, but peace did not return to him. Instead, his pride burned like fire under his skin. Passengers still whispered, their eyes drifting back toward Malik with quiet admiration. The applause had faded, yet the respect remained, and that, to Charles, was unbearable. He shifted uncomfortably in his leather seat, glancing at Tiffany. She avoided his gaze, her lips pressed tight, her eyes betraying what she would not say aloud. The boy had succeeded, where Charles had failed. Charles clenched his jaw. He couldn't allow it. Unbelievable, he muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. This is what happens when you let strangers interfere with family matters. A man from coach leaned forward. Sir, with all due respect, that boy saved us from hours of screaming. Charles whipped his head around. Saved you. Don't be ridiculous. Babies tire out. She was bound to stop eventually. You think some poor boy humming nonsense made a difference? The man raised his brows. Looked like it to me. A ripple of agreement spread. Nods, soft murmurs. Charles' face flushed darker, turned his fury toward Malik, who sat quietly in row 16, pulling at the frayed cuff of his hoodie. You think you're clever, don't you? Charles' voice carried, sharp and accusing. Walking up here like you belong, trying to show me up in front of everyone. Malik's head snapped up, startled. No, sir. You touched my child without permission, Charles barked. Who knows what you intended? People like you take advantage when decent folks show kindness. Gasps echoed through the cabin. The same passengers who had applauded now froze, torn between disbelief and fear of escalation. Malik shook his head, panic rising. I didn't touch her. I only sang. That's all. But Charles wasn't finished. His voice thundered. Don't lie. You leaned too close. You wanted attention, maybe worse. Who lets a stranger get near their baby? He looked around, inviting outrage. Does that sound safe to any of you? The flight attendants rushed forward, alarmed. The black attendant raised her hands calmly. Sir, I was watching. The boy never touched your daughter. He only sang. Charles cut her off with a sneer. Oh, of course you'd defend him. Birds of a feather, isn't that right? The words hit like a slap. A few passengers gasped audibly this time. The attendant's eyes flickered, wounded but firm. She pulled out her phone, sliding it behind her apron pocket, and pressed record. Another attendant spoke up. Firmer, this time, Mr. Whitmore, please lower your voice. You're disturbing other passengers. I'm disturbing them, Charles barked. He pointed at Malik. He's the disturbance, some poor, fatherless street rat sneaking up on my child. If this airline had standards, he wouldn't even be allowed aboard. A woman across the aisle snapped. That's enough. But Charles smirked, satisfied that he still held power. Don't tell me what's enough. When we land, security will deal with this. Malik's chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but the weight of accusation pinned him. He looked around at the silent passengers, at the few brave enough to meet his eyes with sympathy, and at the many who looked away. For a moment he felt it again, that familiar truth. In a world like this, innocence wasn't always protection. Yet, somewhere near the front, a phone camera kept recording. And truth, for once, had found a witness. The plane touched down with a gentle jolt, but Malik's stomach lurched as if it had fallen from the sky. His palms were damp, his hoodie clinging to the back of his neck. Passengers filed out slowly, murmuring about connections and baggage. But the whispers were different this time, heavier, cautious. Many glanced at Malik with pity, a few with silent admiration. Yet nobody spoke aloud. Charles walked ahead, baby in his arms, his voice booming with authority. Yes, yes. First, off the plane, make way. His confidence had returned. On the ground, he was in his world again, a world where his word carried weight. At the gate, 2 uniformed security officers waited. Their posture was stiff, their faces unreadable. Charles strode forward like a man presenting evidence. There, he announced, pointing a sharp finger at Malik as he stepped into the terminal. That's him. That's the boy who endangered my child. The words sliced through Malik's chest. Gasps scattered among the passengers lingering nearby. The taller officer narrowed his eyes. Sir, what exactly happened? Charles puffed up his chest. He approached my infant daughter without consent, leaned over her crib, muttered things, threatened her safety. Ask anyone, I had to stop him myself. Malik's mouth went dry. That's not true. I only sang quiet, Charles snapped, his tone dripping with superiority. No one asked you. The officers exchanged glances. One looked toward the flight attendants, who had just exited. The black attendant stepped forward quickly, voice steady. I was there. The boy never touched the child. He only sang a lullaby, and the baby calmed instantly. That's the truth. Charles gave a bitter laugh. Oh, please. Are we really taking her word over mine? I'm a paying first-class passenger. Well, look at him. Who are you going to believe? The silence that followed was suffocating. Malik's heart thudded in his ears. He had heard these pauses before, the kind that told him his side would not be trusted. The taller officer cleared his throat, shifting uneasily. We'll need to review the situation. Sir, please calm down. But Charles pressed harder, lowering his voice just enough to sound sinister. If the airline doesn't act, I will. I have lawyers. I have influence. I'll sue for negligence. Do you understand me? The officers stiffened. Power had spoken. Passengers shuffled past quietly, some shaking their heads in disgust, others avoiding eye contact. Few dared to intervene. Malik swallowed hard, wishing he could shrink into the floor. I didn't do anything wrong, he whispered. The black attendant touched his shoulder gently. Stay strong, she murmured. You have witnesses, and I recorded everything. Her phone. The words lit a spark in Malik's chest. Proof existed. Charles noticed the gesture, and his expression darkened. You'll regret that, he hissed at her, barely audible. The officers pretended not to hear. One finally spoke. We'll file a report. Both parties can give statements, but everyone knew how reports worked. Whose word carried weight? Whose story would be doubted as they led Malik aside? His shoulders sagged. The walls of the airport seemed to close in, polished, sterile, indifferent. Yet, in his pocket, the faint vibration of courage stirred. Someone had seen. Someone had recorded. For the first time, the truth wasn't only inside him. For the first time, the system might not bury it. Malik sat in the sterile airport office, the hum of fluorescent lights pressing down on him. The security officers scribbled notes half-heartedly, while Charles paced the room like a king surveying his court. This is a waste of my time. Charles barked. I've told you what happened. That boy was reckless, maybe dangerous. Do your job and remove him from this airport. Malik kept his eyes on the table, fists curled in his lap. He wanted to shout, to defend himself, but he had learned too many times that shouting only made him look guilty. The officer muttered, We'll complete the report, sir. Then both sides can be contacted if necessary. Charles scoffed. If necessary, I'll make it necessary. Do you know who I am? The black flight attendant, standing quietly in the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but firm. Yes, they will know who you are. Because this, she lifted her phone, is already uploading. Charles' face drained of color. What? Her thumb tapped the screen. A notification blinked. Video posted. Billionaire attacks poor boy. On flight after he calms baby. Charles lunged forward. Delete it now. She stepped back. It's too late. It's in the cloud. And people are watching. Across the city, in a crowded cafe, a young woman scrolled through her phone. She paused at the video. Curious, she pressed play. The grainy footage showed Malik standing near the first-class crib. His voice soft, a lullaby weaving through the baby's cries. Then the silence, as the child rested. The applause, the looks of disbelief. And then, Charles' voice, cruel, cutting, spitting accusations. People like you, street rat, fatherless. The cafe went silent as strangers leaned over her shoulder to watch. A man whispered, That's disgusting. Another shook his head. Unbelievable. That poor kid. Within minutes, the video spread. Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. Comment sections exploded. This is racism, plain and simple. The boy deserves a medal, not harassment. Who is this millionaire? Expose him. By nightfall, Charles' name trended alongside words he couldn't control. Bigot, racist, monster. Back in the office, Charles' phone buzzed violently. He glanced down, his face tightening as headlines flashed across the screen. Reporters were tagging his name. His company's account was being flooded with angry comments. He turned on the attendant, his voice shaking. "You'll pay for this. Do you hear me? I'll ruin you." She stood taller, meeting his glare. "You already ruined yourself. All I did was press record." Malik lifted his head slowly. For the first time, he saw something new in Charles' eyes. Not power, not pride, but fear. The officer's phone chimed next, then the others. Both men glanced at the screens, exchanging stunned looks. One whispered, "It's everywhere." Charles' bravado cracked. "This doesn't mean anything. People exaggerate online. It'll blow over." But outside the office window, voices echoed down the terminal, travelers watching their own phones, shaking their heads, some even booing as Charles' name spread like wildfire. The tide had turned. Malik exhaled, shaky but firm. For the first time that day, the weight on his chest eased. Truth, once silenced, had found a stage larger than Charles could ever control, and the world was finally listening. By morning, Charles Whitmore's name was everywhere. Headlines blared across news sites. "Millionaire humiliates black teen on flight, gets exposed online." Viral video shows racist outburst by CEO. "Baby calmed by boy. Father reacts with hate." Clips of Malik's lullaby were stitched into TikTok edits, layered with captions like "his voice was love, his words were hate." Hashtags trended, hashtag justice for Malik, and hashtag Whitmore exposed. Charles' phone buzzed relentlessly, but this time not with deference. Angry shareholders demanded explanations. The board of his company released a statement. "We do not condone or excuse discriminatory behavior. Mr. Whitmore has been placed on immediate leave pending review." His empire, once untouchable, cracked overnight in his penthouse office. Charles slammed his fist against his mahogany desk. "This is ridiculous. A boy sings a lullaby, and I lose everything." Tiffany stood near the window, arms folded. She had been silent for hours, watching the storm devour them. Now her voice was cold. "You didn't lose everything because of him. You lost it because of yourself." Charles turned, eyes narrowing. "Don't start." But she didn't flinch. "You humiliated yourself. You humiliated me. And now, everyone sees what I've seen for years." Her words cut deeper than the headlines. For the first time, Charles faltered. Meanwhile, Malik sat in his small apartment, staring at his cracked phone screen. His inbox overflowed with messages, strangers thanking him, reporters asking for interviews, activists offering support. "You okay?" a neighbor asked softly, poking her head through the open door. Malik nodded slowly. "I think so. I didn't want all this. I only wanted the baby to stop crying." The neighbor smiled sadly. Sometimes the smallest kindness unmasks the biggest cruelty. Malik swallowed hard, unsure if he was ready for the attention. But a part of him felt something new, not fear, not invisibility, but dignity. Back downtown, a crowd gathered outside Whitmore Enterprises. Protesters held signs, "Money can't buy morals, and we stand with Malik." The chant was loud, echoing through the streets. Inside, the board convened in a closed meeting. One by one, directors voiced concerns about the company's reputation, about deals collapsing, about clients cutting ties. Finally, the chairwoman stood. "Mr. Whitmore, your actions have jeopardized not only your child's peace on that flight, but this company's future. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position." The gavel of corporate justice struck. Charles sat frozen, his face pale, his empire slipping through his fingers. News of his downfall spread as fast as the video had. Commentators called it poetic justice. A boy's lullaby had brought down a millionaire's arrogance, and though Malik didn't cheer or celebrate, he felt a quiet shift inside. The world had witnessed not just his humiliation, but his humanity. For once, the powerful man's voice hadn't been the final word. The truth had spoken louder.